Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Laurent, and I decided to go with the Spiral of Silence theory, which is chapter 29. I specifically chose this chapter due to the things that we're witnessing going on right now, from the reform of the GOP party to the guidelines of mask wearing during the pandemic, to even what we're watching and witnessing go on with Palestine and Israel, and the amount of people who are speaking out and granting presence to a voice that is normally not heard. So, with that, the Spiral of Silence origins begin with Noel Newman, who claims that people's assessment of the political climate, especially their forecasts of future trends, are early and reliable indicators of what will happen. Newman's Spiral of Silence theory directly explains the growth and spread of the public opinion. So he was someone who, during an election process, was able to pick up on the fact that rather than asking people who they voted for, he more so wanted to know who he thought was going to win. Because more times than not, we can feel, especially with public opinion, where a trend might go. And it has been proven that it normally goes in favor of the public opinion. So with that being said, we're going to move towards public opinion. 17th century philosopher John Locke regarded public opinion as a tangible force. The three forms of law, divine, civil, and opinion, informed our conscience as human beings. Public opinion is the attitudes one can express without running the danger of isolating oneself. It is a tangible force that can keep people in line. So with that, we're going to move on to the Spiral of Silence, which is informed by the public opinion. So Spiral of Silence speaks of the increasing pressure people feel to conceal their views when they think they are in the minority. The quasi-statistical organ is a sixth sense we all have that tallies up information about what society in general is thinking or feeling. Noel utilizes two questions to get a feel for where people are at. So in dealing with the present climate, he would ask a question that was phrased around, regardless of your personal opinion, do you think most people, ... Or the future forecast, he would ask a question along the lines of, will fewer people within this feel this way a year from now? And this was a way of just generating information and kind of like the first forms of surveying that we were doing. So with that, we're going to move towards the fear of isolation, which informs our willingness to speak out or not speak out. The fear of isolation is the centrifugal force that accelerates the spiral of silence. Newman believes that people conform more out of a desire to identify with the winner than through the fear of isolation. So one way that we can look at that and view that is when we are seeing what's going on with the GOP right now, the Republican Party, and how people such as Marjorie Taylor Greene and how the Republican Party has extended itself as this big tent umbrella that is willing to take in many others regardless of if their stance is formulated in fact or science. So we're seeing a current rift go on between the likes of, like, say, Liz Cheney, who has been there since she's been there via her dad, who is also a part of the Republican Party. She is also was the third sitting most powerful within the party, and has recently lost that due to her unwillingness to double down on Donald Trump's lie of him winning the election. She was more willing to stand in a space of, if we go on with this lie, if we don't dismiss it for what it is, we could lose the very foundation of democracy, which is the willingness and the freedom to vote and to be heard. So going from there, isolation based of public opinion can happen via banishment from the group, long-term solitary confinement, and sanctioned public ridicule. I had Liz Cheney as an example of this, but we will be going into further detail about her later on, so I'll just hold on to that. To end the conversation on the fear of isolation, I wanted to give a quote. The worst sickness is not leprosy or TB, but the feeling of being respected by no one, of being unloved and deserted by everyone. That's why individuals are constantly trying to access the climate of public opinion. So, from going from the fear of isolation, we're now going to go into media's hand in the spiral of silence because it does a great deal in both priming and framing us, as well as accelerating the muting process. So, media accelerates the muting of the minority in the spiral of silence via priming and framing, which was something that we learned about during the agenda setting theory, which was a few chapters after we learned about the spiral of silence. So, pluralistic ignorance is people's mistaken idea that everyone thinks like they do. A huge component of this is due to a lack of mixed viewpoints being proportionate to their strength in society. TV has an all-surrounding presence. TV does not only tell us what to think about, but gives us the sanctioned view of what everyone else is thinking. Newman also stated, "I've never found a spiral of silence that goes against the tenor of the media. For the willingness to speak out depends in part upon sensing there is a support and legitimization from the media itself." So we see that happen in two different ways. We have media outlets that are more so aligned with our own personal thinking. So maybe a conservative going towards Fox News, or a liberal going towards like MSNBC. And then we have those media outlets that sit more so in the middle, like a CNN. And essentially what happens is if you are only going to one form of media, specifically a form of media that is more in line with your way of thinking, you might end up with a sense of disproportionate view of other people thinking the way that you think, when in reality, the viewpoints are not mixed enough to really show you how the world or the public opinion is truly being formed. All right, so now we're gonna move from media's hand in things to when people decide to speak up or choose to speak up. We are all in one shape or form influenced by the spiral of silence, and also we influence it ourselves. With that being said, individuals who see their public opinion being shared are more likely to speak up, whereas those who notice their opinions are losing ground will be more inclined to remain silent. The spiral of silence can be pictured as the descent of minority factions as their viewpoints are met with discrepancy and ultimately silence. Those who move on to change the world. All right, so amongst the minorities, not all will necessarily remain silent. There are two different types of people who are known for speaking up irrespective of if they are in the minority or the majority. There are the hardcore nonconformists. These are people who have already been rejected for their beliefs and have nothing to lose by speaking out. An example, once again, would be Liz Cheney in her ongoing fight to stand by the moral grounds of the Republican Party of the past and where it is going today, and has stood very firm in saying that I will continue to fight even after losing her seat within the GOP. Another example would be, or another group rather, is the avant-garde, so the intellectuals, the artists, the reformers, and the isolated minority who speak out because they are convinced they are ahead of the times. The chance to change or mold public opinion is reserved to those who are not afraid of being isolated. By saying and doing the unpopular, by shocking, they can carry their ideas to supremacy. We can honestly use Donald Trump as an example of the avant-garde when he initially came in, not because he fits the mold of an intellectual or an artist, but he was someone who was willing to speak out in a brazen manner regardless of how shocking it may be, which then allowed others who had like minds and like views to feel more comfortable speaking out openly, even though their views for so long had been a form of the minority, or at least the silenced minority. The last thing that I wanted to touch on before we just wrap everything up was the fact that there's a myriad of different things that can make someone feel less inclined to speak up or to be silenced. For instance, we know that a young male of middle or upper class are more inclined to speak out, whereas someone who is old, a woman, someone who identifies with the LGBTQ community might not be as willing to speak out. One, because publicly they are normally those who are silenced or shut down on a regular, or two, their views might not sit with the moral compass of the public opinion, and that might require more shifting or change. Another thing that can affect it are personalities, having high or low self-esteem, whether or not you are involved in the issue or can keep yourself detached, because if you're involved in the issue, you're living it day in and day out, you don't have that ability to just remove yourself from social media or change the channel of the news and push yourself away from whatever is going on. And another thing is just being a part of a reference group. Now, the beauty of the spiral of silence has been playing out in front of us in regards to what's going on with Palestine and Israel. And we are slowly but surely watching a group that has been silenced for so long, being able to have more of a voice and being able to speak out. And we've actually been told by different Palestinian outlets that our willingness to speak out via social media has helped immensely, because normally they're not given any voice via media at all. So with that, that concludes my discussion on the spiral of silence theory. I did go a bit over, but I definitely wanted to talk about its prevalence with what's going on today. And thank you so much.